In 2015, an international team of scientists did something humans hadn't done in 4,500 years. They sent a tiny, camera-equipped robot crawling up an 8-inch wide, perfectly square shaft deep inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. 200 feet into the pitch-black tunnel, the robot's camera captured a dead end, a solid stone door, completely sealed, with 2 mysterious copper pins embedded in its face. When researchers drilled a tiny hole to peek behind it, they found a second, identical door. Modern science continues to struggle with the geometry of this structure. The civilization that built it had no wheels, no pulleys, and no iron tools. Yet they cut and moved millions of massive stones with a margin of error that is almost undetectable to the naked eye. The explanation for this level of engineering doesn't require extraterrestrial help or lost magic. It actually starts thousands of years earlier, with a desperate, brutal fight for human survival. Roughly 11,000 years ago, northern Africa looked nothing like the map we know today. Scientists call this the African Humid Period, a time when the Sahara was a vast, lush savanna filled with deep lakes and roaming hunter-gatherer tribes living in a green, fertile landscape. This map shows northern Africa and how quickly that environment collapsed. A slight shift in the Earth's axis moved the global monsoon patterns. Over a few centuries, the lakes turned to mud, the vegetation died, and billions of tons of sand swallowed the continent. The roaming tribes had no choice but to flee. Starving and desperate for hydration, these nomadic families were pushed out of the expanding wasteland, wandering blindly across the dunes in search of a single drop of water. Those who survived the migration eventually stumbled onto a miracle cutting straight through the sand, a massive permanent river that never seemed to run dry, the Nile. For these survivors, the endless walking was over. But to stay alive on the narrow, fertile banks of this harsh new world, they had to stop running and learn how to bend nature to their absolute will. Every single year, the Nile River swelled and flooded the surrounding valley. But when those waters receded, they left behind a thick layer of pitch-black mud, a hyper-fertile compost washed down from the mountains of Ethiopia. The former nomads noticed that wild seeds dropped in this mud sprouted within days. Violent raiders from the Badlands began attacking the settlements, burning huts, and stealing the harvest. To survive, farmers traded their freedom to strongmen who could provide physical protection. Around 5,000 years ago, one of those warlords, King Narmer, used overwhelming force to unify the separate communities along the river, forging the first massive Egyptian empire under a single ruler. Controlling millions of pounds of grain created a logistical nightmare. To keep track of the taxes and storage levels across the empire, administrators invented an intricate system of written symbols, hieroglyphics, to record their wealth. The pharaohs now had total control over the economy, but they faced a problem. If they died like common men, their claim to divinity would vanish, and with it, the authority that kept the grain silos full and the empire unified. To solve this, the rulers proclaimed that the king's physical body was the direct link to the gods. They warned the population that if the pharaoh's corpse rotted, the sun god would withhold the rains, the Nile would dry up, and the entire nation would starve. Driven by the fear of national collapse, Egyptian priests developed a scientific preservation method. They extracted the organs, dried the hollowed-out corpse in special salts for 40 days, and wrapped it in linen to create a mummy that could resist decay for millennia. But a preserved body still needs a safe house. Initially, kings were buried under flat mud-brick tombs called mastabas. These were failures. Desert winds eroded them, and grave robbers easily tunneled through the soft mud to reach the gold buried inside. They needed something indestructible. An engineer named Imhotep solved this by switching from mud to solid rock. By stacking 6 stone mastabas on top of one another, he created an artificial mountain, the Step Pyramid. Later builders tried to create a monument with completely smooth sides, but they miscalculated the physics. The weight of the 54-degree slope caused the internal chambers to buckle, forcing the engineers to flatten the angle mid-construction to keep the entire structure from collapsing. The engineers learned from that failure. They adjusted their formulas and finally calculated the correct angle to build the Red Pyramid, the world's first structurally sound, smooth-sided monument. With the engineering blueprint finally complete, the kings had the means to attempt the largest display of human architecture the world had ever seen. When Pharaoh Khufu took power, he commissioned the Great Pyramid of Giza. At 481 feet tall, it required 2.3 million giant stone blocks to complete. To move 50-ton granite slabs from quarries 800 kilometers away, engineers utilized the Nile's annual flood. They loaded the blocks onto heavy wooden barges, floating them directly to the Giza construction site while the water levels were high. This wasn't built by slaves, but by thousands of skilled citizens. To move the multi-ton stones across land, they placed them on wooden sleds and poured water onto the sand right in front of the runners. This lubrication cut friction in half, allowing human teams to pull the immense weight. This diagram shows the degree of precision involved. The 13-acre base was leveled to within an inch, and they aligned its edges to true north without the use of a magnetic compass. Khufu believed he had constructed the ultimate impenetrable vault to guarantee his eternal godhood. But he had made one historical miscalculation. The fatal flaw of a 400-foot-tall tomb is that it's impossible to hide. Instead of protecting the pharaohs, these stone mountains acted as massive signs advertising thousands of pounds of gold to a desperate, hungry population. As soon as the central government's authority weakened, organized teams of looters smashed through the blocked stone corridors, ripped the mummies apart, and stripped every single pyramid of its wealth. Faced with this complete desecration, later rulers abandoned pyramid building. They opted instead for absolute secrecy, hiding their royal dead in a desolate, highly camouflaged underground network, the Valley of the Kings. That pivot to secrecy is the only reason British archaeologist Howard Carter was able to uncover the perfectly intact tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun in 1922. Tutankhamun died as a minor ruler, yet his tomb was packed with chariots, weapons, and this pristine, solid gold death mask. If this was the hoard of a secondary king, the wealth originally hidden inside the Great Pyramid was likely several orders of magnitude larger. The physical gold of Giza was stolen millennia ago, but the Great Pyramid left behind a set of geometric and physical data points that no grave robber could ever pawn. When modern explorers finally reached the innermost chambers of the Great Pyramid, they found something unusual. There was no gold, no hieroglyphics on the walls, and no mummy. The rooms were entirely barren, forcing researchers to rethink the way these structures were intended to be used. Consider this layout. In the 1980s, researchers noticed that the positioning and relative size of the three Giza pyramids mirror the alignment and brightness of the three stars in Orion's belt, suggesting the builders intentionally projected the heavens onto the Earth. Recent particle scans using cosmic ray technology have also detected large, unexplained voids deep within the stone, pockets of space where no human has stepped in 4,000 years. It is tempting to look at this math and credit ancient aliens or lost magic, but doing so ignores the actual capabilities of the people who lived there. The Great Pyramids stand as the monument to human survival. They are the result of climate refugees who, when faced with extinction, learned to bend water, stone, and the human mind to their absolute will.